The marble hallway gleamed like ice under the chandelier's cold light, and Chioma Corleone, no relation, just an unfortunate pairing of her Nigerian first name and her employer's Italian last name on the staff registry, moved through it like a ghost. That's what good help did in houses like this. They became invisible, breathed quietly, existed in the margins between luxury and violence. Hey, beautiful souls. Before we dive deep into this storm, I just want to say, welcome. Whether you're watching from Lagos, London, New York, or somewhere in between. How are you doing today? Really, I hope you're good. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button because stories like this, they don't tell themselves. And I've got so many more coming your way. Now, let's get into it. It was 11:47 p.m. when everything Chioma had carefully built began to crumble. She wasn't supposed to be on the third floor. Her duties ended at the second-floor library, maybe the guest wing if Mrs. Catalina Meadows, the boss's wife, demanded fresh linens at odd hours. But tonight, Chioma had heard something. A sound that didn't belong in a house this controlled, this silent. A woman's laughter. Low, breathless. Wrong. Her instincts screamed at her to turn back, to return to her small room in the staff quarters and pretend she'd heard nothing. That's what 6 months in this mansion had taught her. See nothing, hear nothing, survive everything. But the laughter came again, followed by a man's voice, deep, unfamiliar, decidedly not belonging to Dante Meadows, the man who owned this fortress and everyone in it. Chioma's heart hammered against her ribs as she moved closer to the source, the east wing, Mrs. Meadows's private sitting room. The door was cracked open, just a sliver of golden light spilling into the darkened hallway, but it was enough. Enough for Chioma to see the woman she'd served tea to that very morning pressed against the silk wallpaper, her Dior dress bunched at her hips, her perfectly manicured fingers tangled in the hair of a man who was not her husband. Chioma's breath caught. She should have run, should have turned on her heel and disappeared into the shadows like she'd been trained to do. But shock rooted her to the spot for one fatal second too long. That's when Catalina Meadows opened her eyes. Their gazes locked across the dimly lit room, predator and prey, and Chioma watched the color drain from the older woman's face. Not shame, not guilt, fear. Pure, crystalline fear. Because in this world, in Dante Meadows' world, infidelity wasn't just a betrayal of vows, it was treason. And treason had only one punishment. The man, whoever he was, didn't notice. He was too lost in the moment, too convinced of his safety within these walls. But Catalina saw everything. She saw the Nigerian maid in the plain uniform. She saw the witness. She saw the end of her carefully constructed life. And in that fraction of a heartbeat, Chioma understood. She was already dead. Not literally, not yet, but professionally, socially, perhaps even physically, if this woman decided she was too dangerous to leave breathing. Because what Chioma had stumbled upon wasn't just an affair, it was a loaded gun pointed at the head of the most powerful crime family on the eastern seaboard. Catalina's lips moved, forming a single word. Out. Chioma didn't wait for a second command. She turned and fled, her soft-soled shoes silent against the marble as she raced back toward the servants' staircase. Her mind spun with panic. Should she pack? Should she run now, in the middle of the night? Should she go to Mr. Meadows and— No. God, no. You didn't go to men like Dante Meadows with problems. You didn't become a problem in the first place. She made it to her room and locked the door with trembling hands. Her small space, barely larger than a closet, had never felt more like a cell. The single window overlooked the estate's eastern gardens, beautiful even in darkness. But there was no fire escape, no easy exit. She was trapped. Chioma pressed her back against the door and tried to steady her breathing. Maybe Mrs. Meadows would let it go. Maybe she'd realized that Kioma was nobody, had no one to tell, no power to wield. Maybe mercy existed somewhere in this house. The knock came at 12:03 a.m., 3 sharp raps that made Kioma's blood turn to ice. "Open the door, Miss Corleone." Victor's voice, head of household staff. Russian accent thick as winter. A man who'd worked for the Meadows family for 2 decades and had probably buried more secrets than Kioma had years on this earth. She opened the door because refusing wasn't an option. Victor stood in the hallway, his face carved from stone. Behind him, 2 security guards she recognized but had never spoken to. They weren't there to talk. "Mrs. Meadows requests your presence in her study. Now." The walk to Catalina's private study felt like a death march. Each step through the sleeping mansion echoed too loud in Kioma's ears. She thought about her mother back in Enugu, about the money she'd been sending home every month, about her younger sister who wanted to study medicine. She thought about how she'd come to America with nothing but hope, and a student visa that had expired 2 years ago, how this job had been her lifeline, how it was all about to end. The study door opened before they reached it. Catalina Meadows stood framed in the doorway, and she'd transformed completely. Gone was the disheveled woman from the sitting room. Now she wore a silk robe, her hair perfect, her face a mask of cold authority. She'd had 15 minutes to compose herself, to decide Kioma's fate. "Leave us," she told Victor. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a coffin ceiling. "Sit," Catalina commanded, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. Kioma sat, her hands fisted in her lap to stop them from shaking. For a long moment, Catalina just stared at her. Those ice-blue eyes that had seemed so elegant in magazine spreads now looked like chips of frozen ocean. Calculating. Merciless. "You saw nothing tonight?" Catalina finally said. It wasn't a question. "No, ma'am," Kioma whispered. "I saw nothing." "Good. Because if you had seen something, if you ever suggested you'd seen something, you would be making a terrible mistake." Catalina leaned forward, her voice dropping to something almost intimate. "Do you know what my husband does to people who betray his trust?" Kioma's throat was too dry to answer. "He erases them," Catalina continued. "Not dramatically. No bodies in the harbor, no headlines. Just gone. And nobody asks questions because nobody wants to be next." She paused. "You're illegal, aren't you? Overstayed your visa?" The words hit like a slap. Kioma had been so careful, so quiet. "How did—" "I know everything about everyone in this house," Catalina said, reading her face. "It's how I've survived this long. And now you're going to survive too, by being smart." She slid a piece of paper across the desk. A termination letter. Already typed, already dated for tomorrow. "You're fired, effective immediately. Gross misconduct, theft of household items. You'll be escorted off the property tonight with whatever you can carry. You'll receive no reference, no final paycheck, nothing. And if you ever speak about this family, about this house, about what you think you might have seen." Catalina smiled, and it was the coldest thing Kioma had ever witnessed. Immigration and Customs Enforcement gets a very detailed tip about an illegal immigrant who's been stealing from a respected family. You'll be deported before you can blink. If you're lucky. The implication hung in the air like poison gas. If you're lucky. Because there were worse things than deportation in Dante Meadows' world. "Do we understand each other?" Catalina asked. Kioma nodded. What else could she do? "Sign it." With a shaking hand, Kioma signed her own execution, professional, social, financial. The pen felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Good girl," Catalina said, and the condescension in those 2 words made Kioma want to scream. "Victor will escort you to collect your things. You have 10 minutes. 10 minutes to pack 6 months of her life." Kioma moved through her tiny room like a sleepwalker, throwing clothes into her battered suitcase. Her hands found the photo of her mother and sister, the only picture she'd brought from Nigeria. She held it for just a moment, letting the tears she'd been holding back finally fall. She'd failed them, failed herself. And the worst part? She'd done nothing wrong except be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Victor appeared in the doorway exactly 10 minutes later. Time. The walk to the service entrance was a blur. The cool night air hit her face as the door opened, and Kioma found herself standing on the gravel driveway with her single suitcase and $73 in her pocket. Everything she had left after sending most of her pay home. The door closed behind her with a finality that echoed through her bones. No job, no references, no legal status, no safety. Just a witness who'd been silenced before she could speak. Kioma pulled her thin jacket tighter and started walking down the long driveway toward the gates that were already opening automatically to expel her from paradise. She didn't look back at the mansion, didn't see the security camera that had captured her midnight walk down the hallway, didn't know that every step, every moment in this house had been recorded and stored in a system that only one man had complete access to. Dante Meadows, who was, at that very moment, 1,500 miles away in Chicago, finalizing a deal that would reshape the entire Eastern Syndicate. Who had no idea his wife had just made the most dangerous mistake of her life. Who would, in exactly 9 days, return home and begin reviewing the security footage he always checked after long absences, because a man didn't survive 30 years in this business by trusting anyone, not even his own wife. But Kioma didn't know any of that as she walked through the gates and into the darkness of a New Jersey night with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. She only knew that she'd lost everything. What she didn't know was that sometimes losing everything is how you finally find out what you're worth, and that the truth, no matter how buried, always finds the light. What do you think Kioma should do now? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're feeling this story already, smash that subscribe button because part 2 is going to shake everything up even more. The Greyhound bus station at 2 a.m. was purgatory with fluorescent lighting. Kioma sat on a plastic chair that had seen better decades, her suitcase between her feet, her mind racing through impossible calculations. $73. No phone. She'd turned in the household cell when Victor escorted her out. No friends in this country. Not really. The other staff at the mansion had been cordial but distant, protecting themselves the way people do when they work in houses built on secrets. She had one option: Father Obioma at St. Benedict's in Newark. He ran a small ministry for Nigerian immigrants, helped people navigate the impossible maze of life in America when the system had no space for you. She'd met him once, months ago, when she'd first arrived and was looking for work. He'd given her his card and told her if she ever needed help. The card. Did she still have it? Kioma dug through her purse with trembling fingers until she found it, creased and worn but still legible. A lifeline made of cardboard. She'd wait until morning, show up at the church with whatever dignity she had left and beg for guidance. But as she sat in that station, surrounded by the debris of other people's desperate journeys, Kioma made herself a promise. She would survive this. Not just survive, she would rebuild. She'd come too far, sacrificed too much to let one vindictive woman destroy her completely. She didn't know that vindictive woman was, at that exact moment, lying awake in her silk sheets, staring at the ceiling, wondering if getting rid of the maid had been enough, wondering if she should have gone further, wondering if Dante would somehow, impossibly, find out. And she definitely didn't know about the man Catalina had been with. Thomas Marchetti, underboss to the Calabrese family, the Meadows' primary rivals. A man who'd been using Catalina for information for 3 years. A man who'd promised her protection, promised her an exit strategy when Dante inevitably fell. A man who'd texted her 20 minutes after Kioma left. "We have a problem. That maid could ruin everything. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away in a private jet somewhere over Kansas, Dante Meadows reviewed contracts with the kind of focus that had kept him alive and powerful for 3 decades. At 52, he was still physically imposing, 6'3", broad-shouldered, with silver threading through his dark hair in a way that made him look distinguished rather than old. His eyes were the color of aged whiskey, warm until they weren't. People mistook Dante for a brute because of what he did for a living. They saw the violence, the power plays, the ruthless business decisions and assumed no intellect lived behind them. They were wrong. Dante had built his empire by being smarter, more strategic, and infinitely more patient than his enemies. He'd also built it by trusting very few people. His father had taught him that, before a rival's bullet taught his father the same lesson. Trust was currency in this world, and Dante spent it sparingly, which is why he'd married Catalina 12 years ago. Not for love, though she'd been beautiful and charming, but for alliance. Her father had controlled the port unions. The marriage had secured shipping routes that made Dante's operation untouchable on the eastern seaboard. Her father had died 5 years ago. The alliance had outlived its usefulness. But divorce in their world was complicated, messy, politically dangerous. So they'd maintained the facade. Separate bedrooms, separate lives, united front. Dante had long suspected Catalina kept secrets. He simply hadn't cared enough to excavate them. She played her role, he played his, and the machine kept running. That was about to change. "Boss, we're landing in 40 minutes," his right-hand man, Luca Ripley, said from across the cabin. Luca was 38, former Marine, the only person besides Dante who knew where all the bodies were buried, literally and figuratively. "Good. I want to sleep in my own bed tonight." Dante closed the contract folder. The Chicago deal was done. 3 new territories, 5 new revenue streams, and the Calabrese family pushed further into irrelevance, or so he thought. "You should know," Luca said carefully. "Victor called earlier. Some staff issue at the house. He said Catalina handled it." Dante's eyes sharpened. "What kind of issue?" "Maid got fired. Theft, apparently. Happened while you were in the air." Something cold moved through Dante's chest. Not concern. He didn't know this maid, didn't care about household drama. But the timing felt wrong. Catalina firing someone while he was unreachable, handling it personally rather than letting Victor manage it. "Pull the security footage when we get back," Dante said. "All of it from today." Luca nodded. He'd learned long ago not to question Dante's instincts. Those instincts had never been wrong. Father Obioma's church was a converted warehouse in Newark's Ironbound district, surrounded by row houses and corner stores with signs in Portuguese and Spanish and Igbo. Kioma stood outside as dawn broke, her suitcase at her feet, trying to gather the courage to walk through the doors. She'd spent the night at the bus station, dozing fitfully, starting awake every time someone passed too close. Now, in the gray morning light, she felt hollowed out. Empty. The church door opened and a small man in his 60s emerged, wearing a worn cardigan over his clerical collar. His face lit up with recognition and concern. "My daughter," Father Obioma said, hurrying down the steps. "Kioma, isn't it? From months ago?" The kindness in his voice broke something in her. Kioma felt tears streaming down her face before she could stop them. Come inside." The priest took her suitcase and guided her into the church, past rows of simple wooden pews, into a small office that smelled like coffee and old books. He sat her down, pressed a cup of hot tea into her hands, and waited. The story came out in broken pieces: the job, the mansion, what she'd seen, the firing, the threats. She didn't name the Meadows family. She wasn't stupid. But Father Obioma had been in Newark for 30 years. His face told her he'd filled in the blanks. "You cannot go back there," he said firmly. Not ever. These people. I know, Kioma whispered. I know what they are. But you also cannot stay in Newark. If they wanted to find you. He trailed off, then stood decisively. I have a friend. She runs a women's shelter in Brooklyn. Safe, quiet. They don't ask questions. I can call her. See if there's space. I have no money for rent. The shelter is free. And I know some families in the Bronx who need childcare. Good people. They pay cash. Don't worry about papers. He smiled gently. You'll rebuild, Kioma. God has not brought you this far to abandon you now. She wanted to believe him. 3 hours later, she was on a train to Brooklyn with an address, a contact name, and the fragile beginnings of hope. She didn't know that hope would be tested sooner than she could imagine. Dante arrived home at 4 a.m. to a mansion that slept like a tomb. He moved quietly through the halls, old habit from years of entering buildings where silence meant survival. His bedroom was in the west wing, far from Catalina's quarters. He showered, changed, and by 5 a.m. was in his private office reviewing the security footage Luca had already queued up. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. Dante watched a young woman in a maid's uniform walk hesitantly down the third-floor hallway. Watched her pause outside his wife's sitting room. Watched her face transform from curiosity to shock to horror. He couldn't see what she was looking at. The camera angle was wrong, but he could see everything he needed to in her expression. Back it up, he told Luca. Show me Catalina's room from the inside camera. Boss, Mrs. Meadows disabled that camera 6 months ago. Said it made her uncomfortable. Of course she had. Dante studied the maid's face on the screen. Young, maybe mid-20s, dark skin, delicate features, eyes wide with fear. She looked like she wanted to be anywhere but there. What happened next? Dante asked, though he was already advancing the footage himself. He watched the maid flee, watched Catalina emerge from her room exactly 8 minutes later, fully composed, phone in hand. Watched Victor arrive at the maid's quarters. Watched the girl, and she was just a girl, really, sign papers in Catalina's study with hands that shook so badly she could barely hold the pen. Watched her get escorted out like a criminal. Find out everything about this maid, Dante said quietly. Name, background, where she went, everything. Already on it. Her name's Kioma Corleone, obviously not her real last name. Nigerian national. Visa expired 2 years ago. Victor has her file. Dante was silent, watching the footage loop. The girl's face as she witnessed whatever had happened in that room. The terror, the helplessness. She hadn't looked like someone caught stealing. She'd looked like someone who'd seen too much. And find out who was in Catalina's room last night, Dante added. Check all external cameras. I want to know who came and went from this house. Luca nodded and left. Dante sat alone in his office as dawn broke over his empire and felt the first stirrings of something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine anger at his wife. Not the calculated frustration of political maneuvering, but real fury at being played for a fool in his own home. Whatever Catalina had been doing, she'd been stupid enough to get caught. And then she'd been even more stupid thinking she could cover it up with threats and intimidation. Amateur hour. He'd built his empire on the principle that loyalty flowed both ways. You protected people who served you well. You rewarded honesty. You crushed betrayal with such totality that it served as a lesson for generations. And from what he'd just watched, an innocent girl had been crushed for the crime of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. That sat wrong with Dante. Very wrong. The Brooklyn shelter was a 3-story brownstone in Bedford-Stuyvesant, nondescript and perfect for disappearing. Kioma shared a small room with 2 other women, Maria from Guatemala and Aisha from Somalia, who asked no questions and offered quiet solidarity. The kind that came from understanding that everyone here was running from something. For 3 days, Kioma barely left the building. She helped in the kitchen, attended the shelter's mandatory counseling sessions, and tried not to think about the fact that she'd lost everything she'd spent 2 years building. On the fourth day, Father Obioma's friend came through. A family in the Bronx, the Patels, Indian immigrants who ran a small grocery, needed someone to watch their 2 young children. 5 days a week, cash payment, no questions. It wasn't much, but it was something. Kioma took the job and began the slow process of rebuilding her life from ash. She didn't know that in a mansion in New Jersey, Dante Meadows was methodically taking apart his wife's entire existence. It took Luca 48 hours to identify the man who'd entered the estate through a service entrance at 11:23 p.m. that night. Thomas Marchetti, underboss to the Calabrese family, Dante's primary competitor for control of the Northeast Corridor. The news landed like a nuclear bomb in Dante's office. "You're sure?" Dante said. "Not a question." "Positive." Facial recognition confirmed it. "He's been coming to the house for months, always when you're traveling. Always through the service entrance. Always leaves before dawn." Dante's face remained perfectly neutral, but Luca had known him long enough to recognize the stillness that preceded violence, the calm before the storm that leveled cities. "Does she know we know?" "Not yet. I've been careful." "Good. Keep it that way." Dante stood, walking to the window that overlooked his grounds, his empire, built on blood and strategy and the absolute certainty that he controlled every variable in his world. Except he hadn't. His own wife had been feeding information to his enemies, sleeping with the man who'd tried to undercut 3 of Dante's major deals in the past year, playing both sides while living in Dante's house, spending his money, wearing his name. The betrayal should have hurt. Instead, Dante felt only cold calculation. Catalina had made her choice. Now she'd live with the consequences. But first, there was a loose end. "The maid," Dante said. "Kioma, you found her?" "She's in a women's shelter in Brooklyn. Started working for a family in the Bronx 3 days ago." "She's talked to anyone? Police? Press? Other families?" "No. She's been completely silent. Scared, probably." Of course she was scared. Catalina had threatened her with deportation and worse. The girl had no reason to believe anyone would protect her. No reason to think the truth mattered in a world run by people like him. Dante made a decision. "Bring her here." Luca's eyebrows rose. "Boss?" "Not as a prisoner. As a guest. I want to talk to her. Find out exactly what she saw. What Catalina told her. And I want her to understand she's not in danger anymore. And if she refuses to come, then make it clear she has nothing to fear from me. Offer her money, protection, whatever she needs. But get her here, Luca. I need to hear the truth from someone who has no reason to lie to me. If you're wondering where this is going, trust me, it's about to get intense." Drop a comment and let me know what you think Dante should do when he meets Kioma. And hit subscribe because part 5 is where everything explodes. Kioma was walking home from the Patel's store, her arms full of groceries they'd given her as a bonus, when the black SUV pulled up beside her. Her heart stopped. Every muscle in her body screamed, "Run!" but her legs wouldn't move. The back window rolled down. A man in an expensive suit, not Dante, someone younger, looked at her with calm, professional eyes. "Miss Corleone, my name is Luca Ripley. I work for Dante Meadows. He'd like to speak with you." The groceries fell from Kioma's arms. Oranges rolled across the sidewalk. "Please," she whispered. "Please, I haven't said anything. I won't say anything. Please." "You're not in trouble," Luca said quickly. "I promise you. Mr. Meadows knows what happened. He knows his wife lied. He wants to make this right." Kioma's mind spun. This was a trick. Had to be. Men like Dante Meadows didn't make things right. They made problems disappear. "If I refuse? Then I leave, and you never hear from us again. But Miss Corleone, my boss is not the person you should be afraid of. His wife is. And right now, you have no protection from her or the people she's connected to. Mr. Meadows is offering you that protection. Luca's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at her. He's also offering you $50,000 for your time and trouble. No strings, whether you talk to him or not. $50,000. More money than Kioma had seen in her entire life. Why? She asked. Why does he care what happened to me? Because, Luca said simply, loyalty matters to him, and punishing innocent people goes against everything he believes in. It was insane. Suicidal, probably. But Kioma thought about the shelter, about Maria and Aisha, and all the other women running from powerful people who'd hurt them and gotten away with it. Thought about spending the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, waiting for Catalina to decide she was too dangerous to leave alive. And she thought about her mother, about the medical bills piling up back home, about her sister's school fees. If I come, Kioma said carefully, I walk out alive? You have my word. She got in the car. The mansion looked different in daylight. Less like a fortress, more like a museum. Beautiful and cold and full of priceless things that could never truly belong to anyone. Kioma was escorted not to some dark basement or isolated room, but to a sunlit library on the main floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens that probably cost more to maintain than most people's houses. Dante Meadows stood when she entered. He was taller than she'd expected, more physically imposing. But his voice, when he spoke, was gentle. Miss Corleone, thank you for coming. Please, sit. Kioma sat on the edge of a leather chair, every muscle ready to bolt. Dante sat across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees in a posture that was somehow less threatening than if he'd stayed standing. I'm going to be direct with you because I think you've earned honesty. I've reviewed the security footage from that night. I know you witnessed something in my wife's room. I know she fired you and threatened you. And I know you've kept quiet because you're terrified. Kioma said nothing. What could she say? I need you to tell me exactly what you saw, Dante continued. Not because I want to hurt you or hold it against you, but because my wife's actions that night may have put my entire organization at risk. And I protect what's mine, including people who've been wronged while under my roof. She'll kill me, Kioma whispered. She'll try, Dante said calmly, but she won't succeed. You have my protection now. Whatever you saw, whatever you know, it stays between us until I decide what to do with the information, but you will be safe. I guarantee it. There was something in his eyes. Not warmth, exactly, but a kind of cold integrity. The promise of a man who kept his word because his word was all that mattered in his world. Kioma made a choice, maybe her last one. I saw her with a man, she said quietly, in her sitting room. They were together, intimate. He had dark hair, expensive clothes. I only saw him for a second before she noticed me. Did you recognize him? No, I'd never seen him before. Dante was silent for a long moment. Then, his name is Thomas Marchetti. He works for a family that's been trying to destroy mine for 3 years. My wife has been sleeping with him and likely feeding him information about my operations. Kioma's eyes went wide. She'd known it was bad. She hadn't known it was treason. So, when you walked in on them, Dante continued, she didn't just panic because of infidelity. She panicked because you'd witnessed her committing what amounts to espionage. You became the one person who could destroy her entire plan. I didn't know, Kioma said desperately. I didn't understand. Of course you didn't. You were just doing your job, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And instead of protecting you, as I should have done, as the head of this household, my wife threw you away like garbage. The anger in his voice was controlled but unmistakable. That ends now. He stood and walked to his desk, returning with an envelope. $50,000, as promised. Consider it severance pay for a job you did perfectly until circumstances beyond your control intervened. Kioma stared at the envelope like it might bite her. There's also a job offer, Dante said. Not as a maid. I think we can both agree that ship has sailed. But I own several legitimate businesses, restaurants, import companies, real estate firms. You could work in any of them. Legal employment, visa sponsorship, benefits. A chance to build the life you came to this country looking for. Why? The question burst from Kioma before she could stop it. Why are you doing this? Dante smiled slightly. It didn't quite reach his eyes. Because my father taught me that a man is only as good as how he treats the people who can't fight back. You couldn't fight back against my wife. But I can. And when I'm done correcting the situation, I want you to know that not everyone in my world is a monster. He extended his hand. After a heartbeat, Kioma shook it. One more thing, Dante said. For the next few weeks, until I've handled the situation with Catalina and Marchetti, you'll have security. 2 men, very good at their jobs. They'll stay close but out of sight. You won't notice them, but anyone who tries to hurt you will. When? Kioma swallowed. When will you handle it? Soon, Dante promised. Very soon. Catalina knew something was wrong 3 days later when Dante asked her to join him for dinner. They hadn't shared a meal in months. The invitation, delivered through Victor with perfect politeness, set every alarm bell in her head ringing. She dressed carefully that evening, a simple black dress, elegant, understated, armor disguised as fashion. Dante was already seated when she arrived at the private dining room. The table was set for 2, candles flickering between them. Romantic, if you didn't know better. Darling, Catalina said, kissing his cheek. This is a surprise. Sit, Dante said pleasantly. We need to talk. She sat, poured herself wine with a steady hand. About? About your relationship with Thomas Marchetti. The wine glass froze halfway to her lips. For one terrible second, every muscle in Catalina's body locked. Then training kicked in. Years of playing this game, of survival through deception. I don't know what you're talking about. Dante smiled. Yes, you do. You've been sleeping with him for 3 years, meeting him here, in our home, while I traveled. Feeding him information about my deals, my movements, my strategies. You've been committing treason, Catalina, and I have documentation of every single meeting. He slid a tablet across the table. Security footage, timestamps, photos taken by people Catalina didn't even know existed. Her world imploded. Dante, she started. Don't. His voice cracked like a whip. Don't insult me by lying now. We're past that. What I want to know is why. We had an arrangement. You played your role, I played mine. Was it money? Power? Or did you actually fall for Marchetti's bullshit promises? Catalina's mind raced through options. Denial was pointless. Tears might work. Dante responded to weakness sometimes, but the look in his eyes told her he was past the point where emotions mattered. He promised me freedom, she said finally. Raw honesty, her last card. A way out of this marriage, out of this life. You've made me a prisoner, Dante. A beautiful, gilded prisoner, but a prisoner nonetheless. So you betrayed me. So I tried to save myself? By selling me out to my enemies, by putting every person who works for me at risk, by... Dante leaned forward, his voice dropping to something deadly quiet. By destroying an innocent woman's life, because she witnessed your betrayal. Catalina's face went pale. The maid told you. I didn't need her to tell me anything. I have eyes everywhere, Catalina. Did you really think I wouldn't review the security footage? That I wouldn't figure out why you suddenly fired someone in the middle of the night? She was a nobody. She was innocent. Dante's fist hit the table hard enough to make the glasses jump. And you threw her away because she was inconvenient. That's not how we operate. That's not who I am. Since when do you care about maids? Catalina shot back, finding her courage in anger. You've disappeared people for far less. People who betrayed me. People who chose to work against me. Not innocent bystanders. Dante stood, towering over her. You made a victim out of someone who deserved protection. And that, more than the affair, more than the information you leaked, that I can't forgive. Catalina stood too, her own fury rising. So what now? You kill me? Make me disappear like all the others? No, Dante said, and his smile was terrible. That would be too easy. I'm going to dismantle your life piece by piece. The money your father left you? Frozen. The properties in your name? Seized. Every friend, every connection you think will protect you? I'm going to show them exactly what you are. A traitor who sold out her husband for a fantasy of freedom. You can't. I already have. The divorce papers are filed. By tomorrow morning, you'll be out of this house with nothing but the clothes you're wearing. No access to accounts, no safety net, nothing. You want freedom? Catalina? You've got it. Let's see how long you survive without my protection. The blood drained from Catalina's face. Marchetti is already in the wind. I sent his boss very interesting documentation about how his underboss was sleeping with enemy wives and putting their operations at risk. The Calabrese family doesn't tolerate that kind of exposure. If he's smart, he's already left the state. Catalina swayed, gripping the table. You've destroyed me. Yes, Dante agreed. I have. Consider it a lesson in consequences. Victor appeared in the doorway. The car is ready, boss. Escort Mrs. Meadows to the guest house, Dante said. She'll spend tonight there. Tomorrow morning, she leaves permanently. Catalina wanted to argue, to fight, to do something. But the look in Dante's eyes told her it would be pointless. He'd already won. The game was over. She walked out with whatever dignity she could scrape together, aware that she was walking out of her life. Dante watched her go, feeling nothing. Not satisfaction, not anger. Just the cold clarity of a problem solved. Now to fix what she'd broken. Kioma learned about Catalina's exile from Luca, who appeared at her new apartment. Dante had insisted she move out of the shelter into proper housing, with the news and a warning. Mrs. Meadows is out, Luca said, but she's not powerless. She's going to be desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. Your security stays in place. For how long? As long as it takes. That night, Kioma lay in her first real bed in months and tried to process what her life had become. 2 weeks ago, she'd been terrified, homeless, certain she'd be dead or deported within days. Now she had an apartment, a job starting next week at one of Dante's restaurants, legal status being processed, and the personal protection of one of the most dangerous men on the East Coast. It was surreal. Her phone rang. A new phone, courtesy of Luca's efficiency. Unknown number. Hello? Miss Corleone. Dante's voice. I wanted to check on you personally, make sure you're settling in. Yes. Thank you. For everything. Don't thank me yet. I still owe you an apology. What happened to you was my fault. I should have vetted my household more carefully, should have protected my people better. You didn't know. I should have. Silence on the line. Then. There's something else. I'd like you to come to dinner tomorrow night. Here, at the estate. Not as staff. As a guest. There are some people I'd like you to meet. Kioma's heart hammered. Mr. Meadows, I don't think... You're not obligated to come. But I think you'd benefit from understanding the full picture of what happened and who you can trust going forward. Plus, and she could hear the smile in his voice, I make a decent carbonara. Despite everything, Kioma laughed. You cook? When I want to remind myself I'm still human. 7 o'clock tomorrow? She should say no, should maintain distance from this world, from him. But something in his voice, loneliness, maybe, or genuine regret, made her hesitate. Okay, she said. 7 o'clock. The dinner was nothing like Kioma expected. Yes, it was in the mansion, but Dante had arranged it in a small, intimate dining room she'd never cleaned during her time as staff. Luca was there, along with two other men Dante introduced as Antonio and James, his oldest friends, men he'd known since childhood. They treated her not like a former maid or a victim, but like an equal. Asked about her family in Nigeria, her dreams for the future, her thoughts on American politics. Normal conversation, human conversation. Dante did cook. The carbonara was perfect. I brought you here, Dante said as dessert was served, because I wanted you to understand something. The world I operate in, it's brutal, often unforgiving. But it's not without rules, not without honor. What Catalina did violated every principle I've built my organization on, and you deserve to see that not everyone in this life is like her. Why does it matter what I think? Kioma asked. Because, Dante said simply, you matter. You could have gone to the police, the press, anyone. Instead, you stayed silent and tried to rebuild with dignity. That's character. That's the kind of person I want in my life, not as an employee but as a friend. The word hung in the air. I don't understand your world, Kioma said carefully. I don't think I ever will. You don't have to, Dante assured her. I'm not asking you to join it, just to understand that within it, there are still good people trying to do right by those around them. Later, as Luca drove Kioma home, she stared out the window at the glittering city and realized something profound. She wasn't afraid anymore. The terror that had defined the past 2 weeks had burned away, replaced by something else. Not trust, exactly. She wasn't naive. But hope. The fragile beginning of believing her life could be more than survival. What do you think happens next? Is Kioma right to give Dante a chance? Or is she walking into something dangerous? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Part 8 is going to blow your mind. 3 weeks later, Catalina made her move. She'd been living in an extended stay hotel in Atlantic City, burning through the small amount of cash she'd hidden from Dante over the years. Marchetti had indeed vanished. She'd heard rumors he was dead, disposed of by his own family for his recklessness. She had nothing. No money, no power, no protection. But she had rage, and she had one piece of information Dante didn't know she possessed: Kioma's new address. Catalina paid 3 men, low-level thugs who didn't know who she was or why she wanted the girl hurt, to make a problem disappear. Paid them the last of her money to send a message that even fallen queens had claws. What Catalina didn't know was that Dante's security team was very, very good at their job. The men never made it within 100 yards of Kioma's building. They were intercepted, questioned, and gave up their employer within 10 minutes. Professionals would have held out longer. These weren't professionals. Luca brought the news to Dante at midnight. She hired thugs to go after the girl, Luca said, his voice tight with controlled fury. We have them in custody. They confirmed Catalina paid them. Dante's face could have been carved from ice. Where is she? Atlantic City, the Regency extended stay, room 412. Get the car. Catalina was packing when they arrived. She'd known, somehow, that it was only a matter of time. When Dante walked through her door, Luca had bypassed the lock with ease. She didn't even look surprised. Come to finish the job? She asked, still folding clothes with shaking hands. I should, Dante said. You tried to have an innocent woman hurt. After everything, after I showed you mercy by letting you walk away, you did this. She destroyed my life. You destroyed your own life, Dante's control finally snapped. Every choice that led you to this moment was yours. You chose the affair. You chose to betray me. You chose to ruin that girl's life to cover your tracks. And now you chose to try and hurt her again. You're not a victim, Catalina. You're just someone who finally faced consequences. Catalina sank onto the bed, and for the first time since he'd known her, Dante saw her completely broken. No mask, no manipulation, just defeat. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Now? You disappear. Not the violent kind. I'm not what you think I am. But you leave this coast. You change your name. You start over somewhere I never have to see you again. And if you ever, ever come near Kioma or anyone else in my world, I won't be this generous again." He dropped an envelope on the bed. "There's $10,000, enough to start over if you're smart about it. More than you deserve." "Why?" Catalina looked up at him with genuine confusion. "Why give me anything?" "Because 12 years ago, you were different. Before your father died, before Marchetti, before all of this, you were someone I almost respected. I'm giving money to that person, not the one you became. Consider it a final goodbye to who you used to be." Dante turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, Catalina, I'm sorry your life led you here. I'm sorry our marriage became a prison. But I'm not sorry for protecting the people who deserved it over the one who didn't." He left her there, alone with her choices. The news reached Kioma the next morning. Luca explained what had happened, what Catalina had tried to do, how Dante had handled it. "It's over," Luca said. "She's gone. You're safe now. Really safe." Kioma should have felt relief. Mostly she felt tired. Did he kill her? No. He let her go. With money even. That's who he is, Miss Corleone. That's why we follow him. Later that day, Kioma called Dante. She'd gotten his personal number after the dinner, though she'd been afraid to use it. "I heard what happened," she said when he answered. "What you did?" "I did what needed to be done. You could have hurt her. Most people would have. I'm not most people." A pause. "Are you okay?" Yes, I think I am. Finally." Kioma took a breath. "I want to thank you. Really thank you. Not just for the money or the job or the protection. For treating me like I mattered when no one else would have." "You did matter," Dante said simply. "You still do." "I'd like to take you to dinner," Kioma heard herself say. "Somewhere normal. A thank you, if that's appropriate." The silence stretched so long she thought she'd made a terrible mistake. Then, "It's very appropriate," Dante said, and she could hear the smile. "I'd like that." 6 months later, Kioma stood in the kitchen of Bella Notte, the Italian restaurant Dante owned in Manhattan's West Village, overseeing the dinner service with practiced ease. She'd started as a hostess but had quickly proven she had a mind for business. Now she was assistant manager, learning every aspect of the operation, making decisions that affected dozens of employees. Her mother's medical bills were paid. Her sister was in her second year of medical school, and Kioma herself was building something real, a life, a career, a future. The door chimed and she looked up to see Dante entering, dressed casually in jeans and a dark sweater. They'd been doing this for months now. These dinners that were part business, part friendship, part something neither of them wanted to name yet. "Your usual table?" Kioma asked with a smile. "Actually," Dante said, "I was hoping you'd join me tonight. Marco can handle the floor." Marco, the senior manager, waved her away. "Go. You've been working 10-hour days all week." They sat at a corner table and Kioma realized Dante looked nervous. She'd never seen him nervous. "I have something for you," he said, sliding an envelope across the table. She opened it carefully. Inside was a legal document. Her eyes scanned the words and stopped, disbelieving on the most important ones. Permanent resident status. Approved. Your green card, Dante said. It came through. You're legal now. Completely. Permanently legal. Kiyoma's hands shook. How? This usually takes years. I have lawyers who know how to expedite things. And your case was strong. You're exactly the kind of immigrant this country should be fighting to keep. She was crying and didn't care. 6 months ago, she'd been terrified, homeless, certain she'd be deported. Now she held the document that meant she could finally stop running. I don't know how to repay you, she whispered. You already have. Dante reached across the table, hesitated, then took her hand. You trusted me when you had no reason to. You saw past what I do to who I am. You made me want to be better than the sum of my choices. That's worth more than you know. Dante, I'm not good at this, he continued. I've spent 30 years building walls around myself, keeping everyone at a distance because distance meant survival. But with you, I don't want distance. I want to know you, really know you. Your dreams, your fears, everything. Kiyoma squeezed his hand. I'm scared. Of me? Of this? Of what we could be. Your world is so different from mine. Then we build a new world, Dante said simply. One where a Nigerian immigrant and a reformed criminal can sit in a restaurant and plan a future without fear. One where loyalty and honor matter more than money or power. One where we choose who we become instead of letting our past define us. Is that possible? With you? Dante smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. I think anything is possible. They sat there as the restaurant bustled around them, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of someone else's betrayal. Two people learning that sometimes the greatest love stories start with the smallest act of kindness. Kiyoma thought about the girl she'd been 6 months ago, terrified, powerless, certain her life was over. And she marveled at the woman she'd become, strong, protected, loved by someone who'd moved heaven and earth to make things right. Okay, she said finally. Let's build that world. Dante kissed her hand, a gesture so old-fashioned and sweet it made her heart ache, and she knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. Not the safe choice, not the expected choice, but the right one. 2 years later. The wedding was small, intimate. Father Obioma officiated, beaming with pride as he watched the young woman he'd helped save marry the man who'd helped her bloom. Luca was best man. Maria and Aisha from the shelter were bridesmaids. The Patel family came with their children, who'd adored Kiyoma during the brief time she'd cared for them. It wasn't a traditional mafia wedding. No 500 guests, no ostentatious displays of wealth. Just the people who mattered most, gathering to witness two people choosing each other despite impossible odds. Dante had sold off most of his criminal enterprises over the past 2 years, going legitimate in ways that stunned his former associates. The restaurants, the real estate, the import businesses, all legal now. He'd kept enough connections to stay protected, but he was building something different, something clean. You changed him, Luca told Kiyoma at the reception. In 30 years, I've never seen him this happy. This human. He changed me too, Kiyoma said, watching her husband, dance with her mother, who'd flown in from Nigeria for the wedding. He gave me back my life. You gave him something better, Luca countered. You gave him a reason to want a different life. Kiyoma's hand rested on her stomach, on the slight swell that only Dante knew about yet. A new life, growing inside her. A future built on ashes, on second chances, on the radical belief that people could change if they found the right reason. As the sun set over the Manhattan skyline and Dante crossed the room to take her hand, Kiyoma Meadows. She'd kept his name because it meant something different now. Smiled at the impossible journey that had led her here. She'd come to America looking for survival and found so much more. She'd been fired, threatened, and nearly destroyed by a woman's jealousy and fear. But she'd also been protected, valued, and ultimately loved by a man who'd proven that honor still existed in the darkest places. "What are you thinking about?" Dante asked, pulling her close. "How lucky I am," Kioma said honestly. "How incredibly, impossibly lucky." "We both are," Dante corrected, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "We found each other in the chaos. That's not luck. That's grace." And as they swayed to music that celebrated their beginning, surrounded by people who'd witnessed their transformation, Kioma understood that some stories don't end with happily ever after. They end with happily ever beginning. With the daily choice to love, to trust, to build something beautiful from the wreckage of what came before. This was her story, her triumph, her proof that even in a world of violence and betrayal, kindness could still win, truth could still matter, and love could still save. Not the fairy tale kind of love, the real kind, the kind that works for its happy ending and earns it through sacrifice, through choosing each other every single day, through refusing to let fear write the final chapter. So there it is, Kioma's full journey from victim to victor, from powerless to powerful, from hunted to beloved. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that redemption is always possible and that one person's kindness can change everything, then please, leave a comment telling me what part hit you hardest. And subscribe if you haven't already, because I've got so many more stories like this coming your way. Stories about underdogs who win, about love that conquers, about second chances that change everything. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. And remember, you're always worthy of the life you dream of, no matter who tried to take it away. Until next time.